It is time to get out of pocket. I'm your host, Michael Davis, and we are live on Boom Broadcasting. Here in a few moments, I am going to have Jason Colenso from Three From Deep and Sideline Savants joining me. And then we also will have, for the first time ever, Donald Wine. He is from the Duke Basketball Roundup, a fellow Dookie, if you will, and from USA Soccercast. He does a lot of content for Fans First Sports Network, so I'm excited to have him on the show for the first time ever today. Now, if you guys are noticing, there is breaking news that the Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy are done. They have ended their partnership. I wrote this article, speaking of Fans First Sports Network, I dropped this article about 15 minutes after the news broke, first by CBS Sports and then confirmed by Tom Pelissero. Mike McCarthy went 49-35 in his 5 years in Dallas, including 3 straight 12-win seasons, and that is the only time it's been done in NFL history. And unfortunately, a lack of playoff success, a lack of getting there this year, despite injuries, despite, holdouts, despite long contract negotiations, McCarthy's done. And this is coming, pretty much a mutual understanding between the Cowboys, Jerry Jones, and Mike McCarthy. And basically the point is they couldn't agree on the duration of the contract and figured it would be the best to just go ahead and end the relationship here. Now, divorces can get messy. My Miami Heat are experiencing that right now with Jimmy Butler, so we'll see how that ends up. But this is tough for me. And here in a couple minutes, I'll bring in Donald. I'll bring in Jason to cover this with me, to cover Mike Vrabel going to the Patriots, to cover the NFL playoff action from this past weekend, and preview tonight's Monday Night Football matchup. But here's the deal. As a Cowboys fan, my phone's getting blown up. I had to throw it on Do Not Disturb because look how many notifications I'm getting right now based on everything that's happening. Everybody's blowing up my phone. What do you think about McCarthy? What do you think about McCarthy? What do you think about, moving on from your head coach? He was a proven winner. I know circumstances at some points weren't the most ideal. I know I wrote an article on Fans First a couple months ago about Mike McCarthy and, candidates they should look at, but this team never quit. You had big-time locker room leaders like Micah Parsons, who doesn't have a contract extension yet, who was given his support for both Mike McCarthy and Mike Zimmer, and now you potentially bring in a coach who could change the offense, a coach who could change the defense, and now you're setting yourself back when you have Dak Prescott locked up, when you have CeeDee Lamb locked up. You're drafting 12th this year. And so I'm not entirely sure how I feel. I know I'll be able to, decompress. I may need a couple extra days on Dad and the Boys for Fans First Sports Network and Boom Broadcasting, their partnership. I may need a couple extra days with me and my dad to figure out what are we thinking, what are we doing. But we're live, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, so I got to bring in my guys. For the first time ever, from Fans First Sports Network, from the Duke Basketball Roundup, and from USA Soccercast, I bring in, for the first time ever, Donald here on the show. Donald, it's great to have you on, and I'm surprised you're wearing a Lions hat right now.
Hey, man, I'm from Detroit. This has been a long time coming, and I'm really, really excited. We're finally, first time we're 1 seed in the playoffs, so first of all, great to be on here to talk some NFL with you, but yeah, it's a wonderful time to be a Lions fan, and we're hoping that this train does not stop.
Hey, well, you didn't have to sweat this weekend because you guys were on a bye. I didn't have to sweat this weekend because much like this guy, our teams were well out of the playoffs, unlike our NFC East rivals. From the Three From Deep NBA podcast, from Sideline Savants, the fantasy football show, we got Mr. NY himself, Jason, in on the show. And Jason, you did a good job with the NBA today. If people are basketball fans, you don't want to miss that. It's available on demand through the Boom Broadcasting YouTube channel. But Jason, Donald, if you guys don't mind, I want to know your opinions on the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy parting ways. And Donald, I know a lot of your candidates, Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, they could have potentially taken interviews this week. now that the news is broke, now the Lions are probably focused on the playoffs. So I'll get your reaction on that here in a couple of minutes. But in terms of the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy, what was your initial reaction? Is this a good move for the organization?
I don't know that anything's a good move for the Dallas Cowboys because it's so amplified by the fact that they are the Dallas Cowboys, right? Like the idea that Mike McCarthy was a bad coach is just null and void. He's a very successful coach, but success does not pay the Dallas Cowboys bills. It does not line Jerry Jones's pockets, right? He wants championships. He wants the guy who's going to bring the Lombardi Trophy back to AT&T Stadium. And McCarthy in that wasn't necessarily the coach for the Dallas Cowboys at that time. So it's interesting also how it all transpired. The fact that he, I guess, it was approached by the Chicago Bears, and the Bears wanted to interview him, and then Dallas said no because they had the exclusive negotiating. Only for a few days later for him to be, on the market and available. So it's interesting how the Dallas Cowboys went about it. I don't know if this is necessarily the right way for them to do it, but Mike McCarthy is going to, and not necessarily all his fault, going to have a tarnished legacy because of the fact that he couldn't get it done in Dallas. But it may not have also all been his fault, right? He had a lot of injuries, notably to their quarterback, Dak Prescott, and he's had a lot of things come up over the years that have just been, the thing that Dallas Cowboys usually get. There's something that always hits at a certain time where it just feels like they're out of it, even when they're doing well. And so I wasn't surprised that he is parting ways with the Cowboys, but I was surprised. I guess I shouldn't be, but I guess I was a little bit surprised in how it all transpired because they had an out and they decided not to take it, and now it feels like they're behind everybody else a week later.
Yeah, and that's the problem is last spring when Derrick Henry was a free agent and Jerry wouldn't re-sign Dak, you're like, okay, do you like Dak? Well, you re-sign him hours before you tip off the season against the Cleveland Browns, and you're like, oh, so you could have saved all that money in cap space, not have to lose any of your players, and have money to go into free agency and get a player like Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley who have made differences for playoff teams this year. It's very dysfunctional. It's very disorganized what Jerry has done. And Jason, I know you're a Giants fan. You're licking your chops right now at just the dysfunction in the front office.
No, it's just welcome to the bottom of the barrel here. I know that it's been a while since the Cowboys have been down this low, so welcome back. Very disappointed the way to see this go. Mike McCarthy did not deserve that. He was a lame duck all year. Look, if you wanted Mike McCarthy to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, you would have gotten a contract done before this year or at least during the year to talk about everything at the end of the season and go through, whatever Jerry Jones thinks he went through about, the end of the year interview or whatever process they go through is completely embarrassing. Look, this is Jerry Jones's circus. He loves to play this game. He did it with Dak in the different contracts. I mean, how many times were they on? Stephen A. Smith was talking about give Dak his money. So Jerry Jones loves to play this game with getting people talking about the Dallas Cowboys, and it was unfair to Mike McCarthy. If anything, I think this is actually going to help him get a job. I think he's going to get a job no matter what. But a lot of people see that he got done dirty. I mean, this was a bad move for the Cowboys. It makes them look really, really petty. Don't even give the guy a chance to interview for a job. You knew you were not going to sign him. I don't want to hear any of this stuff with that little release that Jerry Jones did, thanking him for his service and all that. I think that was a load of hogwash and terrible on Jerry Jones. Just makes him look even worse. Mike McCarthy should have been able to interview for that Bears job. You guys, the Cowboys did not want him this year. It just played into Jerry's favor, them having a bad year. Because I don't think, even if they would have made the playoffs or something, he would have had to have won the Super Bowl this year if Mike McCarthy was going to stick around as a Dallas Cowboy. But I think he came into this year as a lame duck. Very disappointing. Unfortunately, I think he kind of did himself in. Look, you only have one playoff win in 5 years with that type of talent. He had some great seasons there, 12-5, 3 straight times, and you get one playoff win. That doesn't work in Jerry's world. And I think you see what happens there. And I think this is going to make it even tougher for Jerry to go out and get himself a top-tier coach. He's going to get a hungry guy that wants to coach. He's going to try to find maybe a college guy or a coordinator. So he's going to find somebody that's going to want a job and be a head coach. But he's not going to get a big booming name because they just saw the way that they did Mike McCarthy and kicking him out the door on the way out. So as a Cowboys fan, Mike, I have my Giants tissues here for you, buddy.
Okay,
so
we don't need to see that. We don't need
whenever
to see
you
that.
need them. I use them a lot as a Giants fan here lately, so I'm kind of accustomed to them. But it was a bad move. Jerry Jones, I know you want us to talk about the Cowboys, but this was not the way to do it because you embarrassed a head coach, a Super Bowl winning head coach for no reason.
And I do want to touch a little bit on what Jason brought up. But, guys, we are live on Boom Broadcast, and the reason we do this is so you guys can interact with us. And Drew Code Sports Talk, a really great content creator. Cody has become a really good personal friend of mine. Me and him text constantly, and I can't begin to thank Cody for just the person he is. But he's one half of Drew Code Sports Talk. I've been on his show several times. He's been on mine. We continue to collaborate. He says Cowboys are going to end up with Robert Saleh because Jerry's in his Vince McMahon era. And that hurt on so many different levels. As a wrestling fan, as a Cowboys fan, that hurt so much. But Jason brought up a good point, and I kind of want to deflect that question to Donald a little bit. Like, you know, you have Ben Johnson, you have Aaron Glenn, two guys who are being looked at from many teams. And there's two things. A, they're not going to look really for head coaching jobs until maybe even at least that 2-week window between the title game and the Super Bowl. If not, wait until after the Super Bowl. So there's a lot of media attention that could happen if Dallas hasn't secured a head coach by then. And also, like, looking at Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, like, do they want their first head coaching opportunity to come into Jerry's world and all that comes with it? Donald, I'm sure you're a little biased and want to keep them, but, you know, how do you feel on how they would approach that situation?
Well, to borrow Vince McMahon's song, no chance. I don't think they wait for the Dallas Cowboys to come calling because, as you mentioned, they've been taking interviews all week, and you know we'll talk about Mike Vrabel in a second and that coaching search. But you know, Aaron Glenn interviewed with all the other 5 open spots other than the Patriots. I think Ben Johnson interviewed with a lot of them, and those guys are 2 of the hottest commodities, and they have been for 2 years. The fact that they are still Detroit Lions, we are so thrilled about, but we also know that this feels like, at least for Lions fans, it feels like this last chance to win one with those 2, because we feel like they're about to graduate and they're about to get their own head coaching positions in this offseason because they've earned them. And despite the fact that we would love to hang on to them, I think also, you know, and we saw this last year with Ben Johnson, they kind of have a little leverage because they're 2 of the hottest commodities. They can pick the job that they want, and they can pick the situation they want. And most importantly, they can pick the money that is going to take to get them out of Allen Park, Michigan, and get them down somewhere else. We saw Ben Johnson last year was, you know, in the mix with the Washington Commanders, and he started asking for, you know, reported $15 million a year and all this money for staff and assistants. And the Commander said no. And it wasn't because Ben Johnson didn't want to go. It's because he said, I have a really good thing here, and it's going to take a really much better situation financially and otherwise for me to leave. And I think that has lessened a little bit this year because they know that this coaching carousel is not going to keep coming back to them for them to keep holding out year after year. But this feels like the way that this was set up, the Cowboys are in a position where they are going to have to take whatever's left. And it won't be one of those 2. I think, you know, both Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, if they become head coaches, they will have that decided long before the Cowboys get in the mix. Because as we mentioned, you know, the Raiders have talked about it. The Saints have talked about it. Even the Bears have talked about it. And the longer those 3 teams hold out, again, they just run the risk of another team coming in and swooping them. So you'll see the teams that, you know, as they get into longer into the playoffs, the ones that are waiting a little bit longer, those are the ones that are probably in the mix for one of those 2 guys.
Yeah, and we'll cover, you know, briefly kind of like all the coaching openings too. But like, and that is the most frustrating thing, is like being set back so far and with options, like, and granted, like Dallas, the way that job looks is like you have talent. You have Dak Prescott, who was second in MVP voting last year. You have CeeDee Lamb, who proved no matter who is throwing him the ball, he will catch the ball and he will play, even if your playoff chances are low, 0.1%. He'll risk his own health to battle with a serious shoulder injury. And then you have Micah Parsons, who is hungry and playing his heart out in week 18 when the season is done and over. Like, there is a lot of talent on this team, and you could go even further with Trayvon Diggs, DeRon Bland, DeMarvion Overshown if he's healthy. Like, this is probably the most stacked roster in terms of job openings, but probably the most dysfunctional front office that you would have to deal with, because they're going to be in the headlines no matter what. And as much as a Cowboys fan as I am, I hate saying that. There's a team that did sign their head coach, got their guy, and they're not in the headlines a lot. This guy isn't in the headlines a lot, but he is effective. He is well respected in the league. Donald brought it up. Mike Vrabel, the former Patriots player, he played under Bill Belichick, is going up to New England to be the Patriots' new head coach. Now, they went with Gerard Mayo. He was a one-and-done deal. I mentioned Donald and mine's work with Fans First Sports Network, and I dropped an article last year about Gerard Mayo and the potential he had as a Patriots head coach. And now I'm going back in a series of blogs, a series of articles, a series of posts, kind of re-ranking those 8 head coaches. And Gerard Mayo was at the bottom of the list. There wasn't much to be happy for. There wasn't much to look forward to. But with Mike Vrabel and the work he did with Tennessee when it was the Derrick Henry era, now he's going to try to replicate success and get even more in Tennessee or in New England. He was 54-45 in Tennessee, so he won about 55% of his games there. He was 2-3 in the playoffs in 3 appearances from 2019, 2021. And so Vrabel's a Patriot. Yet again, Jason, they weren't patient with Gerard Mayo. How do you see Mike Vrabel's partnership with the Patriots going?
Well, I think this was kind of one of those inevitable things. I mean, Gerard Mayo was picked as the successor for Bill Belichick. Essentially, when you're following someone like that as the GOAT, you already know you're probably going to be on a short leash, and he was a one-hit wonder because they wanted Mike Vrabel as soon as he left Tennessee, but they weren't going to throw him in there the first year because they didn't want him to have to follow Bill Belichick. So you put Gerard Mayo in there, one of those hand-picked guys. He has a bad season, wins the last game, kind of takes the Patriots out of that first pick. So I think that really hurt him because I guarantee behind closed doors, they did not want him to win that game. And as a hungry coach and a young coach, he wanted to win that game. So that just goes to show that the Patriots kind of do the same thing the Cowboys do. You get these owners in behind closed doors. They do what they want to do, and they're going to hire who they want to hire. They wanted Vrabel. He is a Patriot through and through. He doesn't have to follow Bill Belichick now. He gets kind of a nice young team. You know, he's got Drake May, so he's going to have a good quarterback. So he's got something to work with. We're going to see what happens. He was Coach of the Year 2021. He has a really good rapport with the players, so I think he's going to be one of those player coaches. But it's still going to be tough. You know, the AFC, the Pats, they got a long way to go. They need a lot of pieces, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I'm glad they got him now, and the Patriots wanted to get him now because they didn't want him interviewing with anybody else. They didn't want somebody throwing a ton of money at him and making an offer he couldn't refuse. So the Patriots wanted to get him locked up right away. But I really think this was something that was in the works way before the season. I don't want to say even began, but as the season was going, I think this was in the works, which is unfortunate for Mayo because I think, again, the Patriots did him dirty too, but there's NFL stands for not for long. So if you don't do what these owners want, they're going to show you who's boss.
And they showed him who's boss. Robert Kraft is still boss, and he can fire anyone he wants. And Donald, he's hired Mike Vrabel. What do you think of the hire? Is this going to work out long term?
It better, because it better, because that's basically what he set himself up for. I'm with you, Jason. I think Jerry Mayo got a bad rap, right? He got 1 year with a rookie quarterback and was told to lose and lost all but like the last game, it felt like. And because of that, he's fired, and they go with the guy that they really wanted in the first place. But even the hiring process, everyone knew. I mean, the reason why Aaron Glenn took 5 out of 6 head coaching interviews is because the 6th one was the New England Patriots, and he said, "I will not be Rooney ruled. I'm not wasting my time here, because we already know what it is." And the fact that they had to fly in Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich, who have not coached in the NFL since 2022, to serve as that Rooney Rule pick, lets me know that they had this written in the wall back in week 1, and they just needed to get through the motions. They didn't even wait till the full-time interview, post-game interview press conference. They let him do the press conference, and they like, "Oh, by the way, thanks, you're fired." Like, they didn't even let him get back on the team bus. Like, that was already written, and they did him really bad in that. And same thing with Oakland. You have guys who are in their first year, rookie quarterbacks, or rookie situations, and because they didn't lose enough, they get fired, and they already have set to bring in somebody else who they're going to give a much longer leash to, right? Like, Vrabel is going to get all the money, he's going to get all the draft picks he needs, he's going to get all the attention that he needs with regards to free agency, he's going to get all the things he wants, he's going to get all the assistance he wants. Gerard Mayo was not given that luxury, and so it's really hard to look at this and say anything but Patriots better not mess this up, because if they do, then their fans, who are used to winning, right? Despite the fact that they're 7 years now removed from their last championship, still a generation of fans who have only seen them lift Lombardi trophies, and they will get restless. And it does not matter if Kraft is in the owner's box; they will go after him and say, "You are the reason why we're failing, because you've let everybody else go. You ran off your the greatest coach ever." And now you have a new coach in that you say is your guy, and if he doesn't work out, that's on you, because you're the only one left from this era of greatness. So it better work out for him, and it needs to be quick, because I feel like you are soon going to see a Patriots fan base that's going to get super restless, as opposed to kind of this year, where they kind of at least were with Mayo in the sense that, hey, this is going to be a rebuilding year, and we will ride with you for that. But if it was all for this and it doesn't pan out, then people are going to look back and go, Robert Kraft is the reason why we are in this position.
And that's a tough situation too, because a couple things, like, I was thinking when you were talking, like, to make it quick, I mean, this is a 4-13 team. The Jets aren't good. Miami has weapons. They were good a couple years ago. Buffalo has just dominated this division ever since Josh Allen really took over for the Tom Brady Patriots era. And you're giving Vrabel a roster of second-year Drake May, who I was never high on, Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson, one of the worst running back duos in the NFL. They were middle of the pack, but in terms of like running themselves, like, Ramondre Stevenson had like 800 yards, 3.9 yards a carry. Like, wide receivers, nobody was over 700 yards receiving. It, like, you look at this team, and it's like, you come into this organization, you're like, there's not much here. Like, it's going to be a rebuild, and I hope they're patient enough to give a coach like Mike Vrabel time to turn it around. Because if you look at Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, his first year was 9-7, but that was the AFC South. The second year, same record, but he actually got in the playoffs based on the wild card. This is going to take more than 2 years. And if it doesn't work out, here's my thing. You got to start looking towards, okay, we hired Gerard Mayo, who was a Bill Belichick guy. He didn't work out. Mike Vrabel is a Bill Belichick guy. He played for him. If he doesn't work out, and you look at the entire rest of the NFL and realize, oh, Bill Belichick coaching tree doesn't work out long term. And then you look at Bill Belichick without Tom Brady, and you're like, well, we were getting to be a dumpster fire when Bill's still here. It all starts piling up to where I'm not even sure Bill Belichick coaching guys are the answer. And if not, they may need a complete culture shift in New England. But New England, first team to feel their head coaching vacancy. You still have Las Vegas, who fired Antonio Pierce and then fired the GM after saying both of them would stay. They changed their mind last minute. I thought they were going after Vrabel. You got the New Orleans Saints. You got the Jacksonville Jaguars, who fired Doug Peterson. You got the New York Jets. You got Chicago with second-year quarterback Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen potentially, Cole Kmet. They have some pieces in Chicago, and of course Dallas. Jason, or do any of these jobs stick out to you? Which one would you want to go to if you were, looking at saying, hey, I want to be a head coach in the NFL?
It's tough. I mean, you look at all these teams, which one of these teams has the best culture, the best front office? Look, players are players. You can interchange players. You can get guys out. You can bring guys in. You can develop. You can draft. That is, something that's a pretty easy fix, but it's culture change. It's like, what team? The New York Jets. You talk about just a poor culture, a building that is. Who would want to go to that team when the ownership really doesn't know what the heck they're doing? Same thing, Chicago, and a lot of the issues in things that they've did. I mean, with some of the choices that they've made in the past with quarterback and drafting, et cetera. The Jags, actually, I think it's probably one of the better ones because you don't hear too much about that, but ownership too. They've been talking about moving that team overseas, so there may be some real big drama with that. Saints, I think, might be the better of the bunch as far as the culture of the team. Well, if you succeed in New Orleans, you become a hero there. I mean, ask Drew Brees. I mean, so I think that as fan base, a culture, a franchise, I think the New Orleans Saints probably sticks out to me as one of the best ones. And I just, real quick, I want to touch on something that Donald brought up that drives me crazy as you talk about the Rooney Rule. The NFL has a problem. This was, again, Robert Kraft smacking the NFL in the face with the spirit of the Rooney Rule and saying, we don't care about that. We're gonna bust a guy in. Hey, I want you to sit in that chair real quick. Okay, I interviewed you. Get out because I already have the guy I want. So the NFL has a problem. It's disgusting. You had two competent African-American head coaches that had not been given a chance, and all of a sudden they were fired. The way they were, the way they did Mayo, the way they did Pierce. All of a sudden, 1 minute the ownership's like, oh yeah, you guys are fine. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, he's out the door. So the NFL has a huge, huge issue there. And it's very disheartening that it's not being taken care of or even being talked about. But for me, I would say New Orleans Saints, out of all those guys, I think they're the smallest dumpster fire right now.
And I'm glad we are touching on the Rooney Rule because I was doing some research earlier today with the Mike McCarthy firing and what had happened when he got hired. The Cowboys interviewed two candidates. It was Marvin Lewis, the former Bengals head coach, and obviously Mike McCarthy, who got the job. They knew before ever interviewing Marvin Lewis who they were hiring. So I understand why the rule's in place.
They all do. They all know who they want. It's disgusting and that they do this, and it's unfair. And I can't stand that the NFL is putting this face on. You're ruining the spirit of the rule, and really not giving these guys a chance. And it's unfortunate.
And Donald, do you have any alterations to the Rooney Rule that could work? And then in addition, are there any of these head coaching opportunities that would be enticing for a Ben Johnson or an Aaron Glenn?
Yeah, well, I think to touch on the franchises, or I think the clubs that are most ready, I look at that New Orleans Saints job, and I think, like you said, great fan base, pretty decent structures in regards to ownership and general management, and they have some good players. And really, when you look at the NFC South, like they are a hop, skip, and a jump away from competing there. Everybody in the division is, and Jacksonville a little bit less because the AFC South, you have the Houston Texans who are starting to emerge, but they still have the Clemson connection down there, and whether you think Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne are the answer at quarterback and running back, they have at least those pieces, and they have some good pieces on defense as well. The idea about them playing in London is another thing that I just don't really have the bandwidth to kind of figure out how that affects a coach. And if that's something that they really weigh about going to London every single year, once or twice, they're going to be out of their stadium for an entire year in 2027. So is that weighing on coaches' decisions? And then just the ever impending question of, do they just make the full-time leap to London? I don't know if that affects how a coach does. My guess is no. But if that is the case, then that renders them just below the Saints in that regard. With regards to the Rooney Rule, I could go on all day about the Rooney Rule. I think the one thing is that the Rooney Rule was put in, and God bless Rooney. Rooney did it with Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin was the guy who was just going to be one of those interviews, and he turned out he got the job, and he's still in the job. 15 years later, has not had a losing season.
18.
That is how it's years. Incredible. Yeah, it's incredible how long that. But the problem is, not everyone are the Rooneys. Not even the Rooney's family, right? Guess who the Rooneys are linked to? The Maras, who own the Giants. How many black coaches have the Giants had? Like that sort of thing is palpable across the league, and even when you get like Eric Bieniemy, who interviewed for like 4 years and everywhere, and he's now out of coaching. Byron Leftwich was that guy until they fired him from Tampa Bay, and they said, "Oh, well, he's probably going to get a head coaching job pretty soon." He's still on the bench. Pep Hamilton still on the bench. Aaron Glenn did not get any of the jobs he applied for last year. It wasn't that he didn't want to go, is that he wasn't chosen for them. Now he might be chosen. But at the same time, that's the one guy that you're really talking about. Antonio Pierce, you're not really talking about him. The guy who kind of gets the most, most love as far as like being, for lack of a better word, a retread is like Raheem Morris, right? He got the job at Atlanta last year. And, Todd Bowles, who, again, was handpicked by Bruce Arians to take over when he retired at Tampa Bay. So a lot of this times is really guys who are being handpicked. And the question is, does the ownership give them the freedom to be a coach and grow into that role? The Steelers have done it. Tampa Bay has done it. And look what they have done, in the NFC South, being able to get to the playoffs year after year. And then you also have Detroit, who's grooming them. And then all of a sudden, people just don't want them. So it's interesting how that works. I don't know the best way to explain how to change the Rooney Rule because we only have 30 minutes. But at the same time, it needs to change because we get it. Like, I'm black. I know when guys are being called just to be read the phone book and then hang up and say, "Hey, we interviewed them." I know when we see coaches like you mentioned when McCarthy was hired and Marvin Lewis was the only one that was interviewed. It's because he's the only one that said yes. And if you remember, they knew Mike McCarthy was going to be the coach, interviewed him, and then they waited like 4 or 5 weeks to try and find anybody else to interview with the Cowboys, and all of them said no. And finally, Marvin Lewis said yes, and everybody who was a black coach was probably like, "Oh, man, like, you knew what it was." We still have Brian Flores, who, again, was that guy who was the Rooney Rule guy, and he is suing the league because basically he was colluded out of several positions. So the Rooney Rule needs to change, and as long as we keep having some of these paper interviews, then nothing really will change. But it also, I'm not saying this has nothing to do with Mike Vrabel, but they win in the end because they still get the job. And I think that's the real crime here is that we're getting these guys interviews, but it's not turning into long-term stability, except in the case of Mike Tomlin, who can't be the only one that gets that sort of luxury.
Yeah, dude, very, very well said. Yeah, that just matters because you gotta treat these coaches like, hey, we're giving you the keys. Like there's nothing worse than, I mean, looking for jobs, whatever. But if you don't get the keys to do your job, then you're just a warm body. And unfortunate with what happened, Gerard Mayo. Very unfortunate to what happened to Antonio Pierce. I'm sure I'll be evaluating that very soon on Fans First Sports Network. Mouthing Off with Mike hosts the Nightcap. I might pop in a little later tonight after Monday Night Raw for that live stream, saying Vrabel about to shift that culture majorly. Great signing, low key. And he and I were texting back and forth. I had tech issues this afternoon. I was like, all of a sudden, I was like getting ready, and then all of a sudden my laptop shuts down, and I'm like, oh, I mean, what's going on? This is like a 2-year laptop, not even. And I'm trying to do like the control shift, like power everything. It wouldn't work. I was like, what's going on?
Jerry Jones didn't want you talking bad about the Cowboys. He shut you down.
You know what happened?
Conspiracy.
You know what happened? Donald messaged me because I reached out to some Fans First content creators, and Donald's like, hey, if you still want somebody on, I'd love to hop on. And I'm like, you're a Duke fan, aren't you? I'm like, I'll always make room for Duke fans. And then I'm like, hey, I'll let you know within the hour. And I was like working everything.
I think the laptop just was like too many Dukies. I can't. The CPU required can't work.
Man, it can't handle that greatness. Can it? Now, guess who else can't handle greatness? And I am so excited to mention Justin Herbert. The Chargers, not to say I was like preying on their downfall, but as a Cowboys fan, you hear all the time, Dak's not a top 10 quarterback. Dak's this, Dak's that. And then they're all saying Justin Herbert's a top 5 quarterback. And I hate the double standard of this. And I don't think I'm out of pocket for saying this. If Dak Prescott threw 4 interceptions yesterday in a 20-point blowout, do you know what the headlines would read?
Throw them out. Get rid of them.
It would be terrible. It would be like crawl into a hole and die, if you will, because nobody would have gotten off Dak's back. But Justin Herbert does it, and I hear crickets. I don't hear a single word. 14 of 32, 242 yards, sacked 4 times, 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, a 20-point loss. And this comes with one of the best, if not the best defense in the NFL. You know, the defense gave up 17.7 points per game all year. And I was like, guys, defense wins championships. The Texans, they're struggling with health. Chargers, they've won 3 straight. They were in a good position. And I know there were a few drops that, may have led to an interception or 2, but there were some bad throws too for Justin Herbert. Guys, I'm not out of pocket of saying this. Justin Herbert should shoulder a lot of the blame for this Chargers loss. Donald, do you agree?
Yeah, and I think he will. I mean, if you think about it, you mentioned people saying that Herbert's a top 5 quarterback. I've never thought that. You know who else hasn't thought that? Jim Harbaugh. Because Jim Harbaugh, when he first signed with the Chargers, guess what he tried to do? He tried to trade up in the draft to get his quarterback from Michigan, J.J. McCarthy. Now, the way it worked out, he would have ended up with Herbert starting anyway because J.J. had to miss the whole season. But I think when you think about Herbert, we have been it's almost like an industry plant. We've been told this the last 3 years that no, he's about to come around. He's about to turn around, about to make this corner. And then when he does, watch out. Well, we're not watching the Chargers because every time we do, we are subjected to him laying egg in a big game. And it's very interesting that they made the playoffs, but they're in a division where at least for the next 6-7 years, they ain't gonna win because they have the Chiefs, and they can't get past the Chiefs. They could barely get past the Broncos to get into the playoffs, and both of them end up sneaking in. But these guys really need to wonder what shape their team is going to look like with a Herbert behind center. I don't know that they like that answer, but they need to figure out when it's time to cut because he hasn't signed the big extension, right? Like they have time to figure this out, but that time might be dwindling by because once they ink him to that huge deal that he's probably going to try and command in the next, 6 to 12 months, that if they make that decision and they lock in him for another 5-6 years at $60 million a year like everybody else, then they're really going to start figuring out that he's the constant. Brandon Staley couldn't get it done. Jim Harbaugh couldn't get past the first round. Guess who's still there? Who's the one guy who bridges that gap is the quarterback. So in the league where the quarterback gets all the scrutiny, they get all the accolades, they're considered the best player on the team. If Justin Herbert is not the best player on your team, then what's your ceiling? And for the Chargers, you don't look at the Chargers and go, they're just right around the corner. We've heard that for 5 years, and now people have just stopped saying it.
And that's a good point. And Bro Cox, appreciate you hopping on, join us live on Out of Pocket today. Herbert's the most overrated quarterback in the league. I agree. And I mean, just look at what he's done. He came in the league 2020. He has had 2 playoff appearances, 0 for 2 in both of them. Was under 60% his first time there. 273 yards, 1 touchdown loss. Then this year, he's 0 for 1, obviously. 43% completion percentage, 242 yards, and of course the 4 interceptions. Like, if we looked at a quarterback who was 41-38 in 5 years, 2 playoff appearances, both losses, I mean, we would be ridiculing like a guy like Dak Prescott who would wear the star on his helmet. And Jason, I know you're biased against the Cowboys, but Justin Herbert, I mean, Mal the Alpha Mike said it best. Chargers going Charger, Herbert going to Herbert, and he's overrated, Jason.
He's very overrated, but he's also that middle of the road quarterback. He's not the huge arm. He doesn't get it done with his legs. He's Derek Carr light, whatever you want to call him. He's just, he's one of those quarterbacks that can get you some wins. He deserves a lot of the blame for getting blowed out. But you know what? I want to give props to that Houston defense. Stingley is a beast. That Houston defense beat them up. I think they would have beat just about any quarterback on the field that day. They looked that good. But the Chargers did not make plays or call plays to put Justin Herbert in a position to succeed. They didn't have a good run game. They were trying to force stuff down the field. That offensive line couldn't block anything. So they really set him up for failure. And it was just a bad game all around. He gets a lot of the blame, yes. But I guarantee right now, if you put Herbert up as trade bait, how many teams would be crawling over each other to trade for him? You got the New York Jets that need a quarterback. You got the Saints. I mean, they got Carr, but they need someone a little bit better than him, so they would go for a quarterback. You got Las Vegas, and he's a quarterback. There's a lot of teams out there that are dying for a quarterback. You got 2, 3, maybe 4 halfway decent quarterbacks in this draft, unless you kind of find a diamond in the rough. But who else you got? So there's a lot of teams out there that would drop everything right now and trade for Herbert if you put him out there. So he may have had a bad game. He's not in that top tier echelon, but he's not, as a Giants fan, he's not a Danny Dimes. He is not an old Aaron Rodgers. He has some potential. That's one of those things that you got to coach him. You got to put him in the right system, and you got to give him the right play calls. Because if not, he's not Lamar Jackson. He is not Josh Allen. Right now, he's not even the second best quarterback in his division. It's Patrick Mahomes and Bo Nix. And then you got the trash underneath of him. So I'm putting Bo Nix ahead of him because he showed a lot more, even though they got blowed out. But again, I think they just did some bad play calling and didn't put Bo Nix in a place where he could succeed. But Justin Herbert is definitely overrated. They're trying to put him in that top tier when he's not. He is the middle of the road. He is the 15 through 25 quarterback that can get you some wins, kind of get you to the playoffs, but you need more around him. Quentin Johnson, he's terrible. You need to get rid of him. He couldn't catch a football. Lad the Impaler, Lad McConkey is a absolute stud. what a phenomenal performance from him. But other than that, who else did he have? He had no other weapons. He had no run game. He couldn't do it by himself. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Josh Allen. So we can beat him up a little bit. Yes, he deserves to get beat up. But at the same time, I'm beating that coaching staff up because they did not put him in the position to succeed at all. And then I'm giving tons of props to that Houston defense. And Stingley, he deserves to be on that all-pro team because, man, he had a phenomenal game.
I will say the Houston Texans defense, they're known for that, right? When the Lions went down there for Sunday Night Football, Jared Goff had 5 interceptions. It just so happened that we figured out a way to win the game. That's the only difference between Jared Goff and Brendan Herbert or Justin Herbert. But
because he had more weapons. When you got Sonic and Knuckles, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah, but I think again at the end of the day, like you lay an egg in the playoffs, and it's going to point back at you. But at the same time, I think you're right in crediting the Houston defense for how they performed because they came ready to play and they stole the show. It made it where CJ Stroud and the offense for Houston didn't really have to do much except not be mediocre. They just had to hand off the ball, throw the ball, and get the ball in the end zone because they were getting great field position all day long from their defense.
Oh, and that is what that was what changed the game, honestly, because, outside, the first quarter, Chargers, couple field goals, and you're like, okay, you're feeling good. And then the Chargers, forced Joe Mixon to fumble for the first time in 1,000 and some touches, which is insane in its own right. But then it was the Texans are, working with 40 yards to go, 50 yards to go, rather than being all the way backed up. Aside from, of course, that weird 13-play, 99-yard drive in the second quarter, that was towards the end of the quarter. That was huge. And then obviously the interception, didn't help with that and gave Houston a few more points before halftime. But 32-12, if that happens to Dak Prescott or any other quarterback, we're ridiculing him. So just
there you go.
Okay. But we did bring up some of the other wild card games from this weekend. There were a lot. And we only have about 10 more minutes left on Out of Pocket today. So wanted to kind of run through these games a little bit. The Ravens beat the Steelers, the AFC North rivals, 28-14 in a score that was not even that close. Speaking of not even close, the Buffalo Bills just trounced another really good defense. I think Denver was third in the NFL in terms of points per game allowed. But it was 31-7. Buffalo took care of business. Even though Bo Nix didn't look that bad, the Eagles defeating the Green Bay Packers 22-10. And Green Bay is the only 7 seed to be a 2 seed, but they didn't have the same fortune this year as they did last year against the Dallas Cowboys. And of course, Washington in Tampa. This was the closest and most exciting game of the weekend, and Washington won it on a doink game-winning field goal. Of all things that could happen on Wild Card Weekend, it's been a lot of blowouts and that one really close game between the Commanders and Buccaneers. So of these 4 games, I want to ask you guys, what stood out to you in terms of what happened this weekend? Donald, I'll start with you on that.
Washington being the only road team to win. That's the story right there, and how they've come about their first win since 2005. I live here in DC. I know they are going crazy, but got to come see me next weekend. But I think them getting over that hump is important. We're no, we all had our droughts in the playoffs, and to get over that requires a lot. And Jaden Daniels, I have to admit, is something special to be able to will that team. And I mean, did you guys see the kicker at the end? He kept adjusting his hairstyle because he needed it just right to doink it off the post. I know both of you don't like the Commanders advance anything. I don't either. But we get to at least pretend it's 1991 and go after some payback. But I think that's the real key here is they go in on the road, the only road team to win, and it was also the closest game. As you mentioned, all the other ones were kind of out of pocket pretty quickly. Denver Broncos go up 7-0, and then the Bills said, okay, we're done playing football now. It's time to play Bills football, and they scorched them. So a lot of duds as far as like competitiveness in these playoffs, except for that very last game of the weekend, and maybe even tonight on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, and we'll preview that game before we go off air tonight. And Bro Cox, I won't read this comment, but I'll read this comment. They need some humbling. Probably talking about the Commanders with rookie quarterback Jane Daniels and Dan Quinn back as a head coach after his 28-3 loss in the Super Bowl to the Patriots. And Drew Code Sports Talk saying Ravens and Bills is going to be a slugfest. Maybe we need to get my people talking to Cody's people and maybe even Drew's people and see if they'll come on and predict that Ravens and Bills game a little later on this week. We'll see if we can work it out. My channel, your channel, we'll see what we can do. But Bo Nix, like that opening drive to go down and score a touchdown, I'm like, okay, this is happening. Like, and I called it on Out Pocket. I'm like, guys, Denver is going to upset the Bills. You're going to hear about Sean Dermott being on the hot seat. And then I don't know what happened to that footage. I never said those words. To move on from this point, Jason, what stood out to you this weekend?
Well, first of all, Donald, I'm over here in Northern Virginia. I'm over in Winchester, so I didn't know you were a neighbor. So
yeah,
shout out. All right, DC in the area, because we heard the doink, and I think every house in my neighborhood erupted. I can hear the vibrations. So for me, what stood out was Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, the two MVPs, stepped up. Look, Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen have had some shaky playoff appearances, fumbling the ball, not really getting over the hump, just underperforming. And both of those guys came out and said, I'm not losing this game. So really that's what stood out to me was those two guys really standing up and winning decisively. The Ravens run the football with Derrick Henry. The stiff arm, then some of the stuff he does is amazing. But those two guys to clash now, everybody wishes this was the AFC Championship game. It's a shame that they're meeting this early. But phenomenal performances by both two guys that are up there for MVP. They could have, just laid an egg and not did well, but they performed excellent. So that was the biggest thing I took away from here is you got two guys that are essentially fighting for the MVP next weekend.
And you can't forget Saquon Barkley, who helped Philadelphia big time this past weekend and throughout the entire year. Rick 8-Bit, join us. Shout out to you watching us live on Out Pocket on Boom Broadcasting right now. He's saying all hail King Henry and kind of like tying a nice little bow before we talk about tonight's Vikings and Rams wild card game on Monday Night Football. This is what stood out to me. This is going exactly how Baltimore wants it. Drew Code saying Ravens and Bills going to be a slugfest. No, it's going to be Lamar and it's going to be Derrick Henry just having their way because guess what? The Ravens went out and did what Dallas wouldn't do and went and signed Derrick Henry, knowing Derrick Henry makes a difference. And Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson together, Lamar off an MVP year. Lamar has better numbers now than he did last year when he won MVP. I still think Dak cost the MVP award. And I mean, I would not be appalled or hurt or upset or surprised if Lamar took back-to-back MVPs. But that would be a huge contribution to Derrick Henry. I mean, Lamar Jackson, 16 of 21, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, 15 carries, 81 yards. But when Derrick Henry is averaging 7.2 yards a carry, 26 carries, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like both of them are healthy. And it's literally going to be like the easiest thing in the world. And Drew Code saying, what's the weather going to be in Buffalo next week?
That's what I'm looking at now.
I don't think it
Jason,
matters.
It don't matter because guess what? The Ravens can pound the football.
It's going to be 22 degrees, so it's going to be a little cold. So it's going to be a little chilly there, but no snow. No snow.
That ain't nothing.
I will say I went to the Monday Night Football game. Oh, I'm sorry, it was a Sunday night game or a Monday night game. When the Ravens played the Bills back in September. I was in the building for that game when Derrick Henry went for 199 yards and somehow did not get 200. That game, let me tell you, was one of the better games of the season. And I expect it to be ever much that and more, right? Like the fact that it's in Buffalo now, the one thing that concerns me is, remember, the Ravens hosted last year's AFC Championship against the Chiefs, and it was cold. And everyone's like, oh, but they're at home, so it shouldn't matter. And they weren't able to get done what they wanted to get done. This is where Derrick Henry comes in, because now if Lamar is not throwing the football well because it's cold in Buffalo, he can hand it off and let King Henry run. So that's an interesting dynamic that's added to this. But make no mistake, that I'm glad that's the game of the weekend, so people don't focus in on my team and the Commanders, and we can kind of just chill on Saturday night while everyone looks forward to Sunday night. But man, that's going to be a fun one, and I promise you that if it's anything like the game I went to, y'all want to tune in and watch that one. It's going to be a great one.
Dude, that just gets me excited. Rick 8-Bit as well with he's saying 15 degrees. See, so anywhere from 15 to 22 weather apps, always messing you up. And this is a good question. Who you trust more in the playoffs, Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson? The answer to that for me personally is Patrick Mahomes, because either way, they're going to have to get past Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. And I would trust Patrick Mahomes 10 out of 10 times. But I think with the team around him, Lamar has the best option. Am I out of pocket for that, Donald?
I think Derrick Henry is the X factor here. If Derrick Henry can get another buck against the Bills, that's really going to help the Ravens. Again, if they can't throw the ball in the air because of the cold or what have you, they have that crutch to lean on. So yeah, he's the X factor. Who do I trust more? It's a toss-up. I think you trust whoever wins this game more, because both have shown tendencies to do well in pretty big games, and they both have shown sometimes they just don't have what it takes to win the big game. And usually for both of them, it's against the Chiefs. But yeah, I trust the Ravens a little bit more, only because they have a King Henry to hand the ball off to. But the Bills are at home, and I promise you, the Ralph is going to be rocking, and you just can't replace that.
Yeah, and Jason, who you trust more in the playoffs, Josh Allen or Lamar?
It is a toss-up between the two. They are both on a collision course right now. Look, the biggest key to this game is going to be the offensive line of scrimmage. Yes, the Ravens have King Henry. It's going to be a run game. It's going to be cold. That ball is going to be like throwing around a freaking cinder block. But you know what? Don't sleep on James Cook. James Cook had a really, really good game. That Buffalo offensive line played very, very well. So I think this is going to come down to who controls the line of scrimmage and who controls the clock. How do you beat the other guy? How do you beat Lamar Jackson? Don't give him the football. How do you beat Josh Allen? Don't give him the football. So this is going to be one of those games where you want to grind it out, a 7-8 minute scoring drive. Even if it's a field goal, as long as you're in the lead and you take 9-10 minutes off the clock, you're not giving the ball to the other guy. So Cook is going to be a big factor in this game too. I think this is going to be a heavy run game, and this is going to be a heavy tight end game, because you're going to need those big guys. You're going to do short passes. I don't think you're going to really see a lot of those deep passes. Then that football is going to be cold and heavy, and those quarterbacks are going to be freezing. So it's going to be an interesting game. I trust both of these guys because they're both up for MVP. So it's hard to not trust them. They got their teams here. But that line of scrimmage is going to be whoever wins the game right there. So it's going to be a good game.
It's going to be a good game, and I'm going to refrain from predicting that game until we get a little later on in the week. Drew Code Sports Talk saying he'll have his people reach out. So hey, just let me know. Just let me know. I'm up for it, right? So we're going to cover this Monday Night Football game here in just a second. But before we do, just want to acknowledge who we had on the panel, Jason and Donald as well. Donald, this is your first time. Where can the people find you? What other content are you doing?
Yeah, so I have 4 podcasts, 2 of which are on the Fans First Sports Network. The ones on the Fans First Sports Network, Duke Basketball Roundup, of course, focusing on Duke basketball and football, and the USA Soccercast, which focuses on American soccer. You can find me online, mainly on Blue Sky at BlazingDW, but I also have my Twitter account as well, also at BlazingDW.
Hey, that's awesome. And hey, fellow Dookie, we're going to have to do some Duke content, especially with
Oh yeah.
Malik Brown going down with the sprained knee. We'll see how much time he misses. And you guys all know Jason, sideline savants, 3 from deep drop today. Before we touch on this Monday night game tonight, Jason, what'd you talk about on the NBA show?
Well, definitely looking at the Cavs are hot right now, although they did lose. Pacers did beat them last night, so they didn't get that 13th win. But you talk about a awesome game against OKC, and they play them again this week coming up. So the Cavs, the best team in the NBA right now, and they look phenomenal. There's just not one. Donovan Mitchell's awesome, but there's not one real stud star on that team. They are playing very, very cohesive basketball. Looked a lot at the standings, and right now, MVP watch. Giannis playing really, really good. Joker having a historic season. He's almost averaging a triple-double right now. So the dad bod god is almost 32 points a game and averaging a triple-double, which is insane for someone that big to have those kind of numbers. And then you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's up there for MVP watch. My crack production staff, again, I got my MVP watch right here. But I'm going to throw in my boy Jalen Brunson because I am a Knicks fan. Dropped 44 yesterday. Beat the heck out of the Bucks, man, which is a great win for them. They needed that. Karl Anthony Towns dropping 30 and 18. So it was a phenomenal game there, a great win for them. So just a lot going on in the NBA now, but it's been kind of quiet. Where are the trades at? Where all these big things are supposed to be happening? You know, the Jimmy Butler drama started and then it kind of died off a little bit. So talked a little bit about that too, because this time of year, as the big teams are bubbling up and the little teams are falling down, usually you start seeing guys get traded here and there and everywhere. We really haven't seen anything going on. So I'm excited about this week.
And what's up, Alyssa? Appreciate you hopping on Out of Pocket with us. If you're just joining us for the first time, we are on Boom Broadcasting with the YouTube channel. So shout out to Alyssa. Join us on Out of Pocket. Appreciate you watching. So yeah, go check out Donald and all his stuff. Go check out Jason. But Monday night, we'll see if that aged well. It's our favorite segment to end the show. Vikings Rams tonight. They are not playing in LA, where the Rams did earn a time. Alyssa is fine. So that is that is what we will that is what we'll say on air right there. But Out of Pocket today, Vikings Rams Monday Night Football. The Rams are not getting a home game because of the LA wildfire, so it'll be in Arizona. So do you guys expect the Vikings or the Rams to win? What's going to be the deciding factor and a final score? Donald, I'll start with you.
Well, first of all, everyone who's affected by the wildfires, we send our love and our hearts. I know people who have had to evacuate. Everyone that I know is fine. They have everything, and so I'm very grateful for that. And I know people out there are lesser, more dire situations, and hopefully they are keeping their heads up. But I think the Rams, usually when you move because of a natural disaster, whether it be a hurricane, wildfires, you had the game in the Ford Field because of the Metrodome imploding due to a snowstorm. Those kind of throw logistics out of pocket. And I think the one thing that the Rams are going to be fueled by is trying to win one for their city. And the Vikings are very good. We've had to face them twice. They have been battles each time. This will be a battle. I think in the end, you see LA win one for LA. I think is going to be close. I will say the score is going to be 24-20. But I think at the end of the day, I think the Rams, they were able to rest guys last week while the Vikings had to really go for it to try and win the division and get the 1 seed. They didn't get it, but the Rams are a little bit more rested. They kind of had their very own little bye week. Now, even with the logistics kind of being disrupted, they still have motivation to go out and win one and potentially, get back into the swing of things and really go for it with Matthew Stafford under center. So I'm going with the Rams 24-20.
Rams is Don's pick. Jason, do you agree?
This is going to be an interesting game. Again, yeah, thoughts and prayers, guys. Oh, everybody in LA, thinking about you. Right now, to me, you got a couple of different things. You got the McVay effect. Sean McVay has been here before. He's won a Super Bowl. Matthew Stafford's been here before. He's won a Super Bowl. So they know how to handle these kind of things. They know how to handle, different sites and that kind of stuff. So they have at least proven themselves. Right now, we're going in with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold has had a phenomenal season. Talk about someone that has rewritten the narrative on his career. Great job and a great year for him. But this is still all new to him. He's never won this many games. He's never been to the playoffs. This is a huge thing for him. He's also, I believe, a free agent after this year. So this is going to be a nice little game for him to kind of show that he is a starting quarterback in this league. Maybe somebody tries to sign him in the offseason. Maybe the Vikings let him go because they got JJ behind him. So this is going to be interesting dynamic to see. But the LA Rams, they have a great run game. They have two dynamic wide receivers, and they got a quarterback that has won a chip. So I am going with the Rams. I'm going to say 32-21. I think they beat them handily. This is going to be very, very big and very emotional. You talk about emotion for the LA Rams here. And I just think the Vikings are going to fall a little short. They do have, Justin Jefferson, who is all world, but that's it. I mean, Addison is great too, but I don't think you just pressure Sam Darnold. I think it's going to be an iffy game for him because he's never been in this position before, and the Rams have, and they've proven that they can get through it too. So give me the Rams 32-21. I think they beat. They think they beat Minnesota, but a great season for Minnesota nonetheless, though.
So I am going to shock some people because if you followed Out Pocket, you notice I've had the Vikings a little low on my top core rankings, but I still think they are a better team than the LA Rams. I mean, if you look at a team and you saw their record was 14-3, you would think, oh, they won their division. They're probably a top 1 or 2 seed. No, they just got the short end of the stick. They're in the same division as Donald's Lions, and I'm sure that Donald doesn't love that the Minnesota Vikings are in these postseason. And I don't think a lot of people are excited about that either. And so I can totally see a scenario where Minnesota just drops them by 13 points, 33-20, and Minnesota takes it and goes on. And hopefully we do get a scenario where we have Minnesota and Detroit in the NFC Championship game, because that would also mean Commanders, Eagles, you would be out of here. But we'll see. We'll see how my predictions go. To answer one of our comments, can we chat, Michael? You can comment anytime on the Boom Broadcasting YouTube channel, and we can talk sports. My DMs are closed, so just FYI. But, guys, we appreciate you so much. Jason from Sideline Savants, from 3 from Deep, Donald from the Duke Basketball Roundup, from the USA Soccercast. It has been a fun, fantastic hour. Guys, enjoy Monday Night Football tonight. Also, enjoy Monday Night Raw, because Mouthing Off with Mike, who was commenting earlier, he'll be hosting a nightcap tonight, immediately following the live stream of Monday Night Raw on Netflix. And so he'll be with Knit Ram from Four Sides of the Ring. And I might even stop by. Who knows? We'll see how I'm feeling. But guys, for myself, for Donald, for Jason, thank you guys so much for talking sports with us in the comments. And Out Pocket will be back tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, for your viewing pleasure. And guys, we'll catch you next time.
Well, that's it. I really hope you enjoyed it. We had a ball making it. Thank you very much.